Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's CEER webinar, where we'll be discussing transmission grids, electricity transmission grids, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. Thanks for joining us in person, for those of you who are here and online. My name is Nazim Kiari. I'm Policy Advisor at the Council of European Energy Regulators, and I will try to run you through this very interesting discussion and very timely discussion we have today on electricity transmission. So we've built today's webinar around CEER's recent report that was published recently on NRA transmission, oversight of transmission grid development and investments. We did quite an extensive work on this very relevant topic, and we hope that today's information and resources will guide you and enhance your understanding of these very challenging and topical issues. Before we begin, I just wanted to share with you a bit of housekeeping rules so we're all on the same schedule. We have 1 hour ahead of us today. We should stay on the clock, and I encourage all of our speakers to also try to be on time. We have a chat and Q&A section, so feel free to drop us any questions you may have. We will collect them and try to address them when relevant, and if we don't have the time, we'll also get back to you afterwards. We are recording this session, which will be available online after the meeting, and you can find the report that we've published on our website after the discussion. So just to very quickly run you through the agenda for today. So we will have opening remarks from Koen, who's the Vice President of CEER, but also acting as co-chair of our Regulatory Benchmarking and Legal Committee. We will then move on to the presentation of our CEER report, which will be done by Nadia Horstmann, who is also the other co-chair of our Regulatory Benchmarking and Legal Committee, as well as Fuchs from the German energy regulator. So we will try to outline a bit the key findings from our report, present you the recommendations, and try to understand how NRAs are tackling some of these critical issues. We'll have stakeholder reactions after the report presentation. I will not present the speakers now. We'll do that a bit later, but we look forward to a very interesting discussion with a very high-level lineup today. And after that, we'll have some final remarks, and we will try to close at 10:30. So with this, Koen, the floor is yours. Thank you for presenting a bit the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazim. Welcome to everybody. Before giving the floor to Vera and Nadia for presenting more in detail our deliverable, I want to put forward that the origin of this webinar can be found in our recently published deliverable, as you can see the title on the screen, namely the NRA Oversight on Electricity Transmission Grid Development and Investment. This deliverable is based on a survey amongst the members of CEER. It's based on a daily practice of the CEER members, what we are living in practice. NRAs are facing the challenges accompanying the huge amount of investments required by the energy transition. As NRA, we are doing our job in the interest of the well-functioning of the energy market by putting the customer in the center of the debate. But we all know that a massive amount of investments requires also a massive amount of financial resources. These costs are included in the budget of the network operators, and those budgets are translated into tariffs, which we can find in the end on the energy bill of the customer. So in the end, the customer will pay the investments. Therefore, the role of the NRAs in the process is very important. And as you can understand, asymmetric information is hampering the work of the NRAs. So NRAs must have full access to the information and data. They must have sufficient financial and human resources, which are essential to allow NRAs to execute their competences with regard to the investments. The aim of our deliverable is to highlight findings which are from utmost importance against the background of the ongoing initiatives from the EU regarding grid development and serves as input for the European Commission in this regard. I hope you will appreciate the webinar, and now I want to give the floor to Vera and Nadia. Thank you.
Yes, thanks to you, Koen, for this introduction to our report. I think you will see our slides quite shortly. There they are. We will now present to you the report a little bit in more detail. I think we can move on to the next slide directly. We do not need to spend too much time on the background. Koen already provided some insights to our rationale for this report. Just very shortly, the background was also mainly, yes, this NRA are tasked with ensuring that grid development is efficient, cost-effective, and also aligned with EU policy goals. But we saw that regulatory oversight powers vary significantly across different NRAs. To that purpose, we conducted a small survey among CEER's NRAs. We got 19 replies, which is quite good and allowed us a good basis for our report. Regarding the content, we looked at the three main phases of the NDP process and the different powers NRAs have in this regard. As you can see here, the first one is about planning and approval, which is more about scrutinizing the content and the assessment of NDPs through NRAs. Then the second one, investment execution, where we examined the powers NRAs have to ensure that projects are built. And lastly, we looked at monitoring and cost control, where we evaluated how NRAs track progress and costs. So in a nutshell, the objective of our report was to assess NRAs' powers in the core phases of the NDP process. When we move on to the next slide, we directly start with the content of the NDPs. So maybe it's also important to stress that we did not want to have a close look at NDPs in detail, but really focus on what powers NRAs have to evaluate those NDPs and which control measures there are. On the left-hand side, you can see the first figure. It's about the content, as I said. You can see that most prominently cost estimates are included in 18 cases. As I said, we got 19 replies, so almost all NRAs have this aspect included in the NDPs. But we also saw that usually different kinds of information are covered. And also the importance given by NRAs varies across countries, which is reflected in differences in national approaches. As said, cost estimates are included, but only few NRAs consider that those NDPs provide sufficient and clear explanations of how cost estimates evolve over time, and also how NDPs report on the tariff impacts for grid users. You can also see that in the figure, tariff impacts are only included in 7 cases, so that is not even half of the NDPs by the responding NRAs. And also, not so often included are sufficient and adequate explanation on cost evolutions. When we look at the assessment of NDPs, we saw that most NRAs use a mix of different criteria. Those can be quite technical criteria, rather going in the modeling direction. Both those can be also more qualitative criteria, which can be policy-based criteria, and so on. So there is a broad variety across NRAs. The approval of NDPs is mostly binding for TSOs, but we also saw that around 50% of the responding NRAs have no power to unilaterally amend NDPs. Those who do not have this power, they said, yeah, but there are some other tools we can use. For example, asking the TSOs to amend by themselves, but I think this is quite a strong finding. The key finding to take from the content of NDPs is that, it is reflecting different national approaches, but cost evolution and tariff impacts are often not sufficiently covered. When we look at the next slide, we have the monitoring aspect included with the scope of NRA monitoring. Here we also have a figure from our report where you can see which aspect is included or not included in the monitoring activities. And we can see that at least included is the impact on consumer energy bills. This is the affordability aspect. In only 2 cases, this was included, but most prominently included are projects completion. In 14 cases, I think this is not surprising. This is also our first finding from the monitoring activities, that the scope is varying, of course, and tariff impacts and affordability are often not included. TSOs are usually obliged to submit a progress report on the activities, also with slightly different contents. And in case there are some deviations, NRAs have different competences. This is or many NRAs reported in this case on the Article 51 from the Electricity Directive, which is covering which competences NRAs have in case TSOs are not implementing a project like it is foreseen in the NDP. So this is this was quite prominently named by NRAs, but we also saw that when it comes to cost increases, the answers were not so rich as in the other case. Let's put it that way. Yes, NRAs mostly said that significant cost increases are often subject to reassessment or scrutiny. But if those increases are justified, the cost increases are usually remunerated via the tariff setting procedures. And one aspect, updates on investment costs by TSOs are usually not legally binding. Again, there are some deviations when we look at the different NRAs. For instance, there are some cases that TSOs are not legally obliged to do so, but if there is a significant deviation, then again, they are obliged to do so. So there are some differences, but when we look at the key finding, we can take away that monitoring is mostly focusing on projects completion and only to a lesser extent on to cost-related matters. And significant cost increases are often subject to reassessment or scrutiny. We can move on to the next slide, where we can see some insights into resources and capacities of NRAs, which they have available for this process. The figure you can see on the right-hand side is about the technical modeling capabilities of NRAs. We can directly see that 11 NRAs reported that they have no dedicated modeling tools. 8 NRAs said that they primarily rely on TSO technical analysis. And when we look at the expertise that is available for this process, 4 NRAs said they have external expertise. This can be consultants or academic partnerships and so on. And only 3 NRAs said that they have dedicated in-house expertise for this process. This is also our first finding concerning resources and capacities. There are significant disparities in staffing across NRAs. We saw that some NRAs only have, for example, 1 full-time equivalent dedicated for this process, but other NRAs, they have more than 15 people working. So this is quite interesting that there are really significant disparities when it comes to staffing and resources for this task. You can see it also in the bullet points we put here. There are some NRAs which really have dedicated teams and advanced modeling tools, but other NRAs have only limited resources and have to rely on TSO provided data. Another finding then is that the effectiveness of oversight is of course then hampered by information asymmetries, which becomes particularly apparent when we look at cost transparency and risk oversight. Also, NRAs stated that they see partial shortcomings in their analytical capacities, which is often tied to insufficient tools or expertise. So the key finding here is that resource constraint exists and there is a need for greater independence from TSOs in technical analysis. When we move on to the next slide, I think it's another slide to go, and then that's the main information from our report. So here we have already the brief summary of our main conclusions from the report, divided into the NDP content, regulatory powers, and resources and capacities. When we look at the NDP content, as I said before, NDPs include cost estimates, but only few provide adequate explanations of cost evolution or tariff impacts. Often we saw there is an underestimation of costs from the CAPEX and OPEX, and also an absence of cost conditional approval of NDPs. The depth of cost benefit and risk analysis varies widely, and also the coverage of some important network investment topics is not mandated. Looking at the regulatory powers, as I said before, 50% of NRAs that reply to our survey have no power to unilaterally amend NDPs and to properly monitor NDPs, but most approved plans are legally binding on the TSOs. And we also can say that the oversight is stronger for the planning aspects, but not necessarily for monitoring, implementation, and especially the costs. And as I said on the slide before, resources and capacities, there is a significant resource gap, and many NRAs lack in-house technical modeling capabilities and rely on TSO-provided data, which is creating information asymmetries. We can move on to the next slide, which is the last slide. Some challenges that arise from our different findings. So the NDP development procedure is not harmonized across member states, and NRAs have different powers in this regard. NDPs do not contain an understandable breakdown of cost estimates. We saw in our survey that only rough estimates of CAPEX are usually included, but not detailed ones. NRA have resource constraints to understand all technicalities of the modeling. For example, when we think of scenarios, there's an information asymmetry with TSOs, so the need for greater independence, as mentioned before. And some NRAs also said that, especially NRAs which have smaller resources, that the high frequency of the NDP review every 2 years can be challenging if the appropriate tools are not given. Concerning the improvement of the process, of course, we can say that strengthened scrutiny powers of NRAs over NDPs might be a beneficial approach. Those were our main findings from the report, our main insights. And with that, I will give the floor to Nadia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vera. Thank you. I think it's quite amazing work that have been made in this report, knowing that this report is the first step in the look that we are planning to do in the cost investment and cost control. There will be a follow-up work on this. As Vera said this morning, the 3 main points: planning, investment cost, and cost control, but also monitoring and NRA's competences. Those are really the 3 elements that were addressed here. And what we can see is that there is indeed within Europe a fragmented landscape. The implementation is uneven. The coordination is a little bit lacking in terms of who is discussing with whom, TSOs, NRAs, ACER, potentially the Commission, but also the coordination between the sectors, electricity, gas, and hydrogen. The interesting thing, I think, in the report is the overview that you might have on the different case studies. The case studies reveals, of course, all these discrepancies that have been addressed by Vera, but they also propose tools. And this is where I want to make the point, because those tools that are put in place by NRAs to increase monitoring tasks, to increase the cost control, there might be a first step on which we shall build upon. So one of the conclusions is that the existing frameworks, as we said, is working quite well, but of course improvement are needed. And when I look at the discussion that we are having now, particularly after the publication of the grid package, the European grid package, I think one of the main requests of the regulator would be to increase NRS competences to look to have an approval power over the national development plan. This would be necessary to increase the efficiency, to increase the coherence of the planning. And this brings me, and that would be the last point I would like to make today, because we will have representative from the Parliament at today's session. Let me go back to the resolution of the Parliament that have been published in June 2025. A resolution that was very much welcomed by regulators, by the way, because in the regulation, you are asking in the report, or the Parliament is asking in the report for a closer supervision of NRAs on the planning. This is exactly what we are also looking at. A reinforced cooperation in terms of planning. Also, this is a point that we that we made quite clearly in the report. And one of the points that is interesting when we look at the grid package and the revision of the 10E regulation, the Parliament is speaking about a targeted revision of 10E. And this is exactly what regulators are looking at, that we are not reviewing all the process. Keep in mind that we have as regulator to implement the electricity market design from 2024. We are in the course of implementation of this package. So we don't need a full review of the 10E. And I think here I can very much agree on what the Parliament was saying. Of course, as NRA, we would like to do more, and I see some question in the chat also looking at, okay, what are you doing in terms of cost control? There is the problem of resources. There is a lot, every new packages is putting on the regulators a lot of new competences. We are quite happy about this because this shows actually that the regulation is at least successful. But of course, this should be accompanied by resources and by proper knowledge. I think Vera mentioned quite often here the asymmetry of information. This is definitely something that this gap can be covered if the resources allocated are increased. So with this, I would finish this intervention and I give the floor to Nazim, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Vera, for this very comprehensive presentation of our report. I do want to emphasize how hard we worked on gathering all this information from the NRAs and being able to present these findings to you here today. So again, thanks a lot for putting all of that together. What I take away, and thanks for this very good conclusion, we need to see more strength and better alignment of NRA oversight when it comes to electricity grids developments. We need more transparency from TSOs when it comes to cost information to better understand how these are evolving through time. And we need to strengthen in-house expertise and tools for NRAs to be able to do their job and steer these investment plans in the right direction when it's necessary. So again, very important report, some good, interesting conclusions, and I'm very happy to be able to put this out there and have this information available for our participants. We are pretty good on time, so I think now we can move to the second section of this webinar, where we will have an external external speakers join us and share their views and reactions to the report. I think the two speakers we have with us today don't need any introduction, but for the sake of formality, I'm very happy to have with us today Anna Stug, who is a member of the European Parliament sitting in the ITRE committee, who will talk us a bit through her experience and her work on the grids issues. And also, of course, Caterina Magni, currently with the Florence School of Regulation, but also extensive experience working on 10E in the past. So very happy to have you both with us. And with no further ado, I would give the floor to you, Anna, please.
Thank you so very much. Before I start, I have to apologize for my voice. I got hit by a nasty cold, but I hope that I can make it through these short remarks. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and also for this report. I think it's really important, and I think for us as well, it almost feels like it is it's giving data to something that we have already looked at, or at least have felt like that was the case, which is in general, to be honest, not just when it comes to NDPs, but in general, a lack of harmonization when it comes to how NRAs work and what rights they have, what opportunities and what resources they have throughout Europe. Because for us, and just to as an opening remark, because to us, something that has become very clear while we were working both on the own initiative report from the Parliament last year, but also when we look at 10E now, is that a lot of the questions and issues that we have when it comes to planning are just increasingly becoming more complicated because, for example, as we all know, low and medium voltage level are becoming increasingly important for the European goals overall. So once but maybe we have some good ideas how to look at the NDPs, and maybe we have some good ideas for 10E and the TY NDPs, but we have to make sure that we have a more harmonized approach overall, because if we don't have a good harmonized approach to planning on the DSO level, on the low and medium voltage level, then as good as our planning on TSO level might be, we're not going to get to the actual results, and we're not going to get the results that we need in terms of our energy transition. But just as an outset, but I do want to go into 2 or 3 points that have been mentioned now, and I think I'll start with the elephant in the room. As you said, of course we have the parliamentary report, and we're very happy that that was received well from the NRAs. But now we have to look at the new grid package that is out. We have to look at the 10E proposal from the Commission, and I think there's a couple of good points in there, and there's a couple of question marks. And I'll start by saying that for us, one of the big, maybe, I don't want to say negative points, but some of the where this proposal is lacking is in clarity. And I think we just heard, right, the lack of harmonization. And yes, while this is a regulation, so we don't have to transpose it into national law, but still, if it's being interpreted in different ways from different countries, different NRAs, different TSOs, then we have a problem. And the proposal that we have right now from the Commission that came out in December, it is lacking in clarity for us in many points. So actually, I have to apologize. I'm not going to answer a lot of questions. I might actually raise more than I can answer, because that is for us what this proposal is. And that brings me to the first point I want to mention, which is the elephant in the room, the central scenario, which is always there when we talk about this proposal now. And I think here again, for us at least, also when you look at the EP report, this is actually something that is relatively close to what we were asking for, which is more central oversight, more central planning, more understanding of having a common European approach to this planning. And most importantly, and I think this speaks to what you were just saying about the asymmetry of information, for us, this is an opportunity of making sure that there's actually more transparency when it comes to data and information. Because yes, the NRAs need tools, but if they have the right tools, but not the data available, then you can't do anything with those tools. So having more of an oversight and more more need for TSOs to also deliver data, not just to NSOE, but also others, or at least for NSOE to be maybe a bit more open with that data, then that could already be, for us at least, an important move forward. But as I said, there's so many question marks. What do they actually mean by scenario? And I'm sure Katarina can say more to that. But also the question of what will the role of NRAs actually be? Is verification mandatory? Is it on request? So is there a good alignment even with NECP cycle? How are we going to feed the NDPs properly into this? So there's a lot of questions, especially when it comes to timelines. And that brings me to another point, because we were just hearing about wanting to have powers for NRAs increased. Their power to amend NDPs, for example. I'll bring a different example from the 10E revision proposal, but we want that, right? I mean, as you said, this is in the EP report. But again, the problem is just writing those powers into law doesn't actually necessarily immediately have that effect. And if you look, for example, at the current 10E, so what we're dealing with at the moment and how we're working at the moment, ASA, for example, does have a right to give opinions on the scenarios. But the problem is the timelines don't add up. So if we look, for example, at 2024, ASA actually gave a negative opinion on the scenario. But by the time the opinion was given, there was no time to actually amend the scenarios. So we have to be very careful when it comes to timelines to make sure that the powers that NRAs, that ACER, that all the regulators have, that they actually have the time to fulfill them. And we just heard, I mean, different NRAs have different resources. So we really have to make sure that we work with a timeline that actually makes the scrutiny that is necessary possible, but that at the same time doesn't prolong our move forwards in this energy transition. So it's not an easy task. We understand that, and we know that it's a high task, but we think that it is possible. And just to kind of start wrapping up, because I want to hear also from the Q&A, just a very quick point about the cost benefit analysis, because we just heard that is a part where not all NRAs have the same level of scrutiny when it comes to that. And obviously in the 10E proposal, there are a lot of aspects on the cost benefit analysis actually on the 10E level. And we see some proposals, some improvements in the proposal, especially when it comes to the question of transparency and having more opportunity there. But I think there's an opportunity there to look at whether and how we can make sure that the opportunities and rights that we are trying to inscribe on a European level with ASA when it comes to cost benefit analysis, that we make sure that NRAs are mandated with the same powers, to make sure again that this is something that has a logic throughout the process and not just at the very end. So this is something I think that we as a parliament will hopefully look at and with the organizational points, which is where do we actually stand with this now? So just as you know, 10E proposal was published in December, and we've just allocated the file within the European Parliament. We've actually just received a few days ago the proposed timeline, which would lead us to having a European Parliament position through the plenary in October, end of October, so October 2 session in the Parliament. So we're very much at the start, which is why I want to leave time for the Q&A, because for us it's at the moment also very interesting to just get your feedback, your input, and see where your questions steer us as well in this process that we are in right now as a European Parliament.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think that's music to our ears as regulators. More clarity on the grids package, more transparency when it comes to the data and tools that are provided, more powers when it comes to cost-benefit analysis to NRAs. I think those are some of the main topics that we will also be addressing as we move forward. Thanks also for sharing the timeline on the Parliament side. I think this is a discussion that we're also following very closely, and we very much look forward to understanding what the current discussion is at the Parliament level. We do want to preempt and emphasize that we will this week share a bit of our views as CEER on the grids package. So that's work in progress. So keep an eye out on this space, and definitely some of these points will be addressed on our position when we publish it. Just to move the floor back to Katarina so that we can have a full-on discussion, and then maybe we can take questions from the Q&A. Katarina, please, very much looking forward to your explanations. Go ahead, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazim, and good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be here today with you. And first of all, congratulations for the report. It was a very, very interesting read. And I was surprised to see how different the practices are in the different regulators, and fully agree with what Anna said, that it is an important source also then for the policymakers to look at. What I will do in the next few minutes is to look at 3 points. There would have been certainly many, many more in the report, but time doesn't allow, and of course my competence doesn't allow everything. So I look at the comment where in the report you mentioned the rapidly changing and complex electricity system. Then secondly, about the NRA scrutiny and the new proposal. And then lastly, if time allows, I will touch upon also on the DSO aspect. So if we start by looking at the energy world as it will be, that of course takes us immediately to the scenarios question. And here I think if just by looking back, so from 2013 until 2022, the ENSOs developed between 2 and 4 scenarios. So scenarios with very different expectations of the future, or very different path to the future. Then currently, so since the 2022 regulation, 10-year regulation review, as according to the framework guidelines from ACER, there is one central scenario plus sensitivities according to economic development, so plus minus sensitivity. And now in the new proposal, the Commission proposes to have one central scenario and sensitivities when external conditions change. So narrowing this from what we have today, which we actually haven't yet seen how it really works. Putting this against then the energy world and the future, I think today the energy future and the general future of the geopolitical world is even more uncertain and even more unknown. I mean, since last week, I mean, what have you seen? We have seen an attack on Iran, just to mention one, but there are many other things that have happened in the past few years. So geopolitics is a big question mark. We see hybrid attacks on the energy system. Technology is developing super fast. 5 years ago, nobody would have foreseen the battery boom that we have today in many countries. Artificial intelligence, what will it do? Decentralization, even more, and much, much more than in the past. And then, of course, the price volatility. So here my question would be that will one central scenario give you as a regulator sufficient certainty of what you are assessing on whether the projects that are put forward, be they in the TUNDP or as they have to be then in the NDPs, is this enough for you as a regulator? If then NDPs are developed using national scenarios in order to get more understanding of the uncertainties, will this not lead to fragmentation because these are not European scenarios anymore? And then second question on this one scenario, again for the regulators, you would be taking the cross-border cost allocation decisions on projects based on the one scenario. Again, my question to you is, Will this be enough? Will this give you the robustness, the certainty to agree on cost sharing? I mean, these are questions to you. My personal answer is that I would prefer to have one central scenario as a benchmark, certainly, that is useful, but 2, 4 additional scenarios that look at different risks, at different technological developments, and in a way, merging the top-down and the bottom-up together. Second point on the new proposed governance that centralizes decision-making to Commission, and that brings member states much more into the process. Here again, I have a number of questions. So how will the NRAs be involved in this process? I mean, in the regulation says that the NRAs will check the data that goes into the scenarios as part of ACER's work. Will this be enough of participation? Then having Commission and member states have bigger say in the scenario making, is there a risk that this focuses on short-term political aspects more than longer-term strategic issues that actually would underpin grid development? And then the third question concerns stakeholders. Will they feel involved? Are they sufficiently brought into? And as a consequence, will they feel that this is legitimate? And then my last point concerns the TSO-DSO integration. I think that is even more important in the future system, as it will be much more decentralized. So the TSO-DSO interaction is necessary. So how to build it into all the planning framework? And here my question and recommendation would be that is the current way of looking at grids, which is EU level cross-border on the one hand, and then national level through the NDPs on the other hand, enough? Wouldn't we somehow need something in between? Could be a regional approach, like we already have in the offshore and the North Sea development, where regional approach brings together all the necessary players, including also the NRAs. So I think I stop here, and I also look forward to the discussion very much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Katarina, for that also very extensive and comprehensive presentation. I think you've highlighted very well the uncertainty that we currently live in, and I think it's also very important that we ask the right questions before we come up with the answers. On scenarios and governance, I think this is also a topic that we've looked into at CEER, and I think we will come up this week or in the coming days on some views and some considerations to be taken into consideration when we develop the grids package. Stakeholder involvement, of course, this is one of the main topics that we try to address with this report and also with our work in trying to make sure that what we're doing makes sense for the end users and that people are on board and that this makes sense in a comprehensive way. So some very key topics that we will definitely address in our upcoming publications, and we take those on board. So thank you both of you for sharing your views. We have 15 more minutes before we close, and I see Nadia and Koen are also back in the spotlight. So I would like to also give you the opportunity to both react to these comments. Thank you both.
Thank you. I'm liking it very well to be in the spotlights. Maybe a short roundup. As mentioned in our report, mentioned by Vera and Nadia, I think the competence of an NRA are very important with this regard. We all know that the investments are very huge, and the challenges for the DSOs to finance their investments is also very huge. I don't deny this. But the challenges for the NRAs, because we have a huge challenge for us, and we have a big responsibility towards the society, towards customers, towards our companies, and more on national level we see it, the issue of competitivity. which is translated in tariffs, in costs for the companies, is very huge. I think the competence towards the network development plans is important, but much more important is the competences we should have in monitoring the execution of the plans for the well-functioning of the market, the execution of the plans and the cost of the plans. And especially we on Belgian side, we had a recent experience where the cost exploded. And we could explain it to Parliament, and because of that, the project was reviewed. But still, we don't have enough data. We don't have enough information, and that's key. If the TSOs are not delivering the data, the information we are asking in due time, it's very difficult to work. You may have tools, but you don't have the data you can't control. Of course, you need human and financial resources, but key is data, is information, the asymmetry of information. And there's still a lot of work to do. Regarding the explanation made by Anna Sturk, I think we should have more contact in the future, because in general we are mostly aligned with what you said. As explained, the CBAs are important, data from utmost importance, but if you talk about CBA, and that's what we lived in last year, that's the whole question about welfare. There's no definition. And so it's so vague, and that's a responsibility for the politicians also, because they have the word to say regarding the network development plans. You can make the welfare more or less important in your CBA. And that's a very, very difficult discussion to have with the TSOs. If I may, if you talk about 10E, I will not enter into detail, but I think that offshore grid may not be forgotten. We are aware that there will be a lot of investments also in the seas, not only in the North Seas, but in the seas. And we all know that those investments are still much more costly. And that since years I'm saying that, there is a lack of guidance. What about the bidding zones? What about the applicable network codes? What about the presence of NRAs in the discussions between the member states and the TSOs? Because in the end, as I explained, it is always the customer, the residential one, the companies who will pay the bill. Regarding the central scenario, I will not enter into detail, because this is still a current discussion on European level amongst ACER and amongst the NRAs. Of course, it's an important issue, but I think we may not forget the national network development plans. And how will we handle this? Well, I can say that on the level of the NRAs, we have contacts with the NRAs from our neighboring countries. We have to work together. We have to connect one country with another country. We have to foresee enough capacity. And I think the increase of the cooperation amongst the NRAs on the regional, but also bilateral, is from utmost importance. And I think it's very difficult to foresee what the future will bring to us. And we have to plan on a longer term, but we cannot deny that the short-term events are intervening in our policies, in our work, in implementing the codes, in implementing the legislation. I'm referring to the energy crisis. I think the European Commission took a lot of short-term measures. I can understand. If you take the example from the import of gas towards Germany, from one day to another, there was a reverse flow from Belgium to Germany. I think that in a way, the Belgian terminal helped to maintain the German industry on a normal level. But it's very difficult. And as we know that investments are planned and before they are executed, it's not about months, it's about years. So it's very difficult to make the right choices. And therefore, the NRAs cannot decide on their own. They need guidance. They need decisions from the political side also. So here I want to close my intervention. I think it's very important that we have this webinar, that we have the occasion to put forward this issue, and there will be a follow-up. We will continue to work on it, not only to have more competences, because maybe it's too easy to say that, but we have to work on the content. What do we need? These are data, information, the tools to work with it, to challenge the TSOs. TSOs are organized on European level. We have to exchange much more information, and therefore I think the CEER is the right place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Koen. I don't think it could be any clearer than that. Nadia, did you have any final remarks you wanted to share? If not the case.
No, at this stage, no, thank you.
Okay. I think that was very clear, Koen, and I think that also emphasizes the relevance of this report. The data is out there. This is a very valuable contribution to the current discussion. You've mentioned the grids package several times during this webinar, so I think that will also be a main topic of discussion this year. We very much look forward to engaging with the Parliament and trying to understand how you're looking at some of these topics, and I think we will have some very engaging discussions. Overall, allow us to do our work efficiently and the right way. I think that's the main ask, and I think this is something that we have tried to emphasize as much as we can in this report. This was a very interesting discussion, getting more questions than answers, but I think, as I mentioned, we need the right questions before we can get to the right answers. This is going to take a strong push from everyone, and I'm very grateful for all of you taking the time to be here with us. We have, I think, 100, at max 150 people in this webinar, so that was great to see this engagement. We have a few questions in the chat, but I believe we should probably take that offline, as we would probably go into rabbit holes of discussions, and I don't think we have the time for that, but we will definitely make sure to get back to all of the questions that were raised and hopefully tackle those in another webinar. As Koen mentioned, this is ongoing work. Be on the lookout. We will have our CEER reaction to the grids package coming out shortly, and we will try to organize follow-up webinars to invite other speakers from different perspectives to try to get as comprehensive a view as possible on some of these topics. So I will probably close here. We are good on time, so I'm very happy. That's great. We invite you to be on the lookout. We will try to host other webinars talking about some relevant topics of these issues, and we will try to keep you informed as we go along. So again, from my side, thank you to all of you for joining us. You know where to reach us if you have any comments. And again, really appreciate you both being on the panel with us. Very happy to have your expertise and insight. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
See you
you.
next
Bye.
time. Bye.